Good afternoon. Hi everyone and welcome to today's session on the age of socially engaged leadership. I'm Naomi Alexander and I'm joined by my colleague Daniel Sanders, and we're really delighted to have you join us for today's session. If I think about what we've had today, kicking off with Genesis and the beatboxing, I feel like I'm a bit of a singer here with my mic, but promise no beatboxing from neither Daniel or I today. But really what we'll be talking about is the age of the socially engaged leader. What are the characteristics that underpin that concept? What are the benefits of having a socially engaged leader that you can take back to your organisations and start to unpack for yourselves? And also providing you with a number of examples of people that are currently on LinkedIn role modelling this type of behaviour to give your leaders some example of perhaps how they could do it for themselves. A lot of the topics that we talk about today in the content, we both feel it's going to be relevant whether you're an SMB, small or medium-sized organisation, or a very large organisation. Whether you have time-poor executives that say that this is just too hard to manage, or you have a very conservative culture where change takes a lot of time. So taking you through some of these examples is really what we're here to do today. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Naomi. And good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start with a little story scenario. Imagine it was an anniversary, special occasion, and you'd booked dinner at the latest restaurant boasting a celebrity chef. Now, you nearly had to remortgage the house to pull this off, but you were sure it was going to be worth it. However, when you turn up to the restaurant, things start to go wrong. There's a mix-up with your booking, and you get sat right at the back near those annoying flappy doors into the kitchen. Your meals arrive and they're quite frankly underwhelming. And no sooner have you finished your last spoon of dessert when they put the bill in front of you because they have to get ready for the next seating. You feel your blood start to boil. Now, 15 years ago, your only recourse of action would have been to complain to the manager and probably to go home and vent to your relatives and close friends to make yourself feel a little bit better. Fast forward to 2015, and social media and review sites like Urban Spoon have changed this business landscape forever. Now, an angry customer with a few well-placed reviews or tweets can create a wave of distrust. And businesses like restaurants and hotels have begun to adapt. They've begun to respond. Now, they know that there's an online conversation going on, and they know that silence strengthens the hands of their critics. So it's better for them to get on and respond. You know, it's no longer possible these days to just sweep the bad news under the carpet. Transparency is the new currency, and that's absolutely key. Now, in larger organisations like the ones represented in this room, very often you'll have experts, of course, who work to preserve and indeed enhance the brand. So what we're going to look at now is how some of these CEOs have in fact been ranked like restaurants these days. You know, you could even say this is the era of the celebrity CEO, where some of these CEOs are integral or even synonymous with the brands they represent. Yeah, so these CEOs are being talked about online. They're being discussed whether they like it or not. And they can choose to engage, respond, to participate in this conversation. It's their imperative to be social, to enhance their own reputation and the reputations of their companies. But why does this matter? What are the benefits of being a social leader or indeed leading a social organisation?
Yeah, so actually Weber Shandwick, who some of you might understand in the market, does a lot of research and actually conducted some studies late last year which concluded that 4 out of 5 employees would prefer to work for a socially active CEO. 4 out of 5. That's nearly 80%, well it is 80% of the workplace. And if we think about that really in terms of what it means by just having that action in our organisations where leaders are able to see themselves as socially engaged, whether they see themselves tweeting, having a LinkedIn profile, appearing on YouTube, any number of things which we'll talk about as the session goes on. But take a moment for yourselves, thinking about your own organisations. What does the leadership footprint in your organisations look like from a social perspective? Does your CEO have a LinkedIn profile? Do they encourage collaboration through social platforms? We'll see in a few more slides that there are also further benefits to be had around engagement and retention. So here in the room today, we know that you get it. You're here in the space and in the business of attraction and retention. But what are some of the hard findings and statistics you can take back to executives that have different concerns and have different objectives to hit? Certainly we can see that the benefits around attraction and retention are there, but are your organisations ready to capitalise on that? Do your leaders understand the link that they have to attraction and to prospective talent?
Now, your CEO does not need to be Richard Branson to be social. Of course, Richard Branson is the best known example of a social leader. In fact, he is a global star. He goes well beyond being a CEO. He's a brand unto himself. But your CEO could have great effect through what we might term social light. In fact, this might be very appropriate for your organisation. Let's look at a concrete example. Who here in this room, raise your hand please, in fact, if you've heard of James Gorman? Anyone? Not many, one person. Okay, I thought it'd be more than that. James Gorman is a public figure, but he has flown below the radar of the public's imagination. He's in fact the CEO of global financial powerhouse Morgan Stanley. He has 55,000 staff in 1,200 offices across the globe. But what's probably more interesting to the people in this room is that he's a local boy. He's one of our overseas successes. In fact, he comes from Melbourne. How many people in this room are from Melbourne?
Oh, go Melbourne.
Fantastic. Actually, that's interesting. How many people are from neither Melbourne or Sydney in this room? Wow. Well, thank you people for travelling so far to come. I'm assuming half of you probably live in Sydney. So James Gorman followed a fairly blue-blooded careers trajectory. After studying law at the University of Melbourne, he went into practice law, then he moved to management consulting with McKinsey before beginning his stellar financial career. And he picked up a Columbia MBA along the way. And sitting here in his mahogany office like this, it paints a fairly conservative image. So it came as a surprise to lots of people when James Gorman accepted an invitation to become a LinkedIn influencer last year. In one swoop, James had become a social leader.
So as we can see here, James maintains a very strong LinkedIn profile. The posts that he publishes appear right underneath his profile photo. And it's probably a little hard for you to see up the back, but he's actually got 90,000 followers. So someone like myself, who perhaps is interested in what James has to say, can actually follow him on LinkedIn as opposed to becoming a first-degree connection. Again, quashing perhaps some of the sentiment with your leaders of, well, I don't need any more people connecting with me. I get enough requests every day. This, in fact, allows them to follow your leaders and understand their point of view. Again, these posts are pushed through the LinkedIn Pulse network and recommended to members like yourselves based on your interest. So if we look here, this is an example of how Morgan Stanley's communications team do a fantastic job of maximising exposure of their leader. Now again, those of you in the room may not have access to a communications team, but if you have a company page, think about ways that you're trying to look for content. In this example, we're seeing an update around James's recent post, and it's being pushed to Morgan Stanley's followers, of which there's over 300,000. So again, for myself as a member, what this is doing is getting greater awareness of who James is, humanising him from that man in the mahogany office, and really trying to get a voice into who he is and what he stands for. And that's really what we're trying to do with leaders as well. We can also see here from this corner box here that the team are actually looking at actively marketing and finding followers for James. So through recruitment marketing, you too can do this and gain more followers for your leaders if that's something that's really important.
Now, James is certainly what we would call social light. He's only posted a handful of posts on LinkedIn. However, the network effect has made sure his voice is carried far and wide. Let's take a look at this. So when James began this about 12 months ago, he had a rather normal looking profile and about 500 first degree connections. That was the extent of his LinkedIn world. Fast forward to today, and as Naomi showed, he's got 90,000 personal followers. All of a sudden, he's interacting personally, directly, with 180 times as many people. Now, where this starts to get interesting, those 90,000 personal followers are in turn connected directly to 45 million people. So bear with me here. When James writes a post, it goes out to up to 90,000 followers, and if just 1% of those were to like, share, or comment, it reaches out to a further 450,000 people. Then, as Naomi showed on the previous slide, when the comms team push his post out further to their 300,000 plus followers, 342,000 at the moment, the same thing applies. Because those 342,000 people are connected to 160 million connections. Not uniques, of course, but the numbers are still large. So that means if they get 1% engagement, they're reaching up to a further 1.6 million. And one thing I haven't got on this slide is that they're starting to activate their employees and encouraging them to share their leaders' thought posts. And that they've got a further 5.5 million connections, their employees. Now, one of the really interesting things when you start to put out valuable content, when you start to put yourself out there as a leader and start to share your thoughts and be transparent and open, is that resonates with people and that the content starts to take on a life of its own on the internet. So it gets picked up by bloggers and other social media sites. And that certainly happened with a couple of James's posts. His very first post on sustainable investment went somewhat viral across the blogosphere. So, as you can see, James Gorman, Social Light, is reaching a very large audience with relatively little effort through the network effect. Now, of course, you're probably sitting there saying, well, Morgan Stanley are huge, these numbers are very big, that doesn't apply to me. But exactly the same principle applies to small organisations and to individuals too, where the similar orders of magnitude can very easily be achieved through social. Now, effectively what's happening here is James is building relationships with candidates, with clients, with staff, but he's able to do it at massive scale. And by opening up and being transparent, he's opening up new windows into their thinking. So let's look at some of the underlying dynamics at play here. We all do business with people and businesses we know, like, and trust. So let's double click on know for a moment. I mean, awareness is the basic cornerstone of all advertising and marketing. Simply by knowing a brand or a person, you're more likely to do business with them. Let's take a real life example. A few nights ago, I was searching online for travel insurance. I went to Google and I typed in annual multi-year travel insurance, and it popped up a long list of results. I selected 3 to get quotes from. How did I select 3? I selected 3 brands I knew. By advertising to me through my life, I had some awareness of those brands, and I was far more likely to select a brand that I'd heard of than one that I'd never heard of. So, simply through knowing the brand, it increased my propensity to do business with it. Yeah? It's the same with people. If you meet 2 people and you like them about equally, let's say you start to see person A much more than person B, you'll start to like person A more. You don't have to have an especially positive interaction with person A. So long as it's not overly negative, you'll start to see things in common with them and you'll start to like them more. So let's look at like. Yeah? So by seeing people more, or brands more often, you're going to like them more. And in marketing, we talk about the rule of 7. And that says, it's a rule of thumb, it says it takes about 7 impressions to make an impact. So it takes time, but after about 7 impressions, you will start to see results. Yeah? And why is that? Because people start to see commonalities. They start to see things they like. They start to see shared values. Now let's look at trust. Excuse me. Let's look at trust. Most of us operate on Facebook to some extent. It's where we talk about personal stuff. Now we know lots of people on Facebook. Hopefully we like most of those people, but do we trust them? Do we know what they do in their professional lives? Do we know they're good at what they do in their professional lives such that we would actually spend money with them? And the answer is, in many cases, we don't know. Yeah? So trust takes time. Liking and knowing are prerequisites in many cases, but they're not enough. As a brand or as a leader, social leader, you need to put yourself in front of people in a helpful, knowledgeable, expert way over a period of time to build trust. By being authentic and consistent and helpful and knowledgeable, over a period of time you'll engender trust, and when people trust a brand or a person, they're more likely to do business with them. So again, these are the steps of relationships, and on social media, we're able to build these relationships at massive scale. So let's now look at some of the ways that leaders can use the LinkedIn platform to engage.
Thanks, Daniel. And certainly we see it in 4 key steps. We pop them up here, and certainly your leaders don't need to be influencers on our platform in order to take these steps on. So really starting with step 1, setting up a LinkedIn profile. As you've seen from the examples, James Gorman is representative of James Gorman. He's not trying to be Richard Branson. And in a similar way, your leaders need to be true and authentic to their voice. Make sure that comes through in their summary. You know how important it is to have a photo, so telling them about the important elements of their profile on LinkedIn, helping them to understand the dynamic nature of the profile on LinkedIn, that it's not just an online CV, that they can in fact talk about professional posts, rich media, content to really bring it to life and engage with prospective talent, and as you said, Daniel, customers and future business opportunities. We'd also suggest posting content. So while sharing a short form post is very effective and will get your message out there, as we've seen, the long form content is really effective for your leaders and their thought leadership stance. The infrastructure in which this has been built has come from our influencer platform, so now it's available for everyone. I myself have posted on LinkedIn in long form, and I'd really encourage your leaders to do the same. As I mentioned, there are so many benefits to getting your message out there in a way that's leveraging the network effect that Daniel's talked about.
So the third thing we'd recommend is to amplify your content through your company page. As we showed through the Morgan Stanley example, by pushing James's posts out to the company's followers, they were able to reach a much larger scale. They were able to invoke this network effect. And the fourth thing is to cross-promote via other channels. A popular blogger, Pat Flynn, coined the term several years ago, be everywhere. And what he meant by that, the underlying idea, was that people consume information in different ways. And if you can reach people on the channels and in the ways that's effective for them, not only are you going to grow your audience, but you're also going to gain greater engagement from them. So, for example, Naomi, I know, loves to listen to podcasts when she's on the stair climber at the gym or driving her car. I prefer to read blogs, sit down in a quiet space and read. Other people like to watch videos, YouTube channels, for instance. Other people are more visual. They like SlideShare, perhaps, or Instagram or Pinterest, a more visual sort of channel. The point is that it's easy to repurpose content and to capture these different audiences in the place that's right for them. So a concrete example, if one of your leaders or thought leaders was to write a post, why not share that on Twitter? Easy. Why not also promote it through your corporate blog? Why not take a short video of your leader or thought leader expressing the same views and put that on a YouTube channel? Why not create a slide deck and put that on SlideShare? It's easy to repurpose content, and once you get into the workflow, it's very fast.
And so whilst this might seem daunting for your executives and they're not sure where to start, we know that you're best placed to help guide them through some of this and navigate what is actually in front of them. And we wanted to take you through some examples around leaders that are on LinkedIn doing this. And if I remind us of that statistic, 4 out of 5 employees would prefer to work for a socially active CEO. The benefits of trust, how clear that trust is there for invoking on transparency of your leaders, accessibility. These are all the themes that we want to try and bring to the forefront. So if we look here, this is Anna Lee, CFO of The Iconic. Who here has heard of The Iconic? Yeah, so you'll share my love of shopping as well. And certainly being true to the Iconic's brand identity and what they're all about, we can see here that Anna also maintains a strong profile with a professional and engaging photo. Her summary, it's very hard for you to read this, but essentially her summary is her tone of voice. It's explaining what it's like to work at The Iconic, her experiences, and in true sense to who she is. And we can see here in this example, Sandy Carter, who's a general manager at IBM. Again, if I think of myself as a member, first and foremost, being a female in digital and tech in the space, I'm always interested to hear about opportunities. And if someone like IBM were to approach me and suggest, consider a career with us, we have a number of females in leadership roles that I think you'd find are really great for your own career. And they might even go to the point of suggesting you might like to check out Sandy Carter before your prep for the interview. And I jump onto LinkedIn and I see Sandy's profile, which actually is pretty good. Sandy is also very much maintaining her profile with her photo, her summary, her tone of voice, which talks about her career at IBM, her challenges as a female leader. She also goes to the point of showing through rich media examples of work that she does on a day-to-day basis. So myself as a prospective candidate can see what it actually means to be a female in tech at IBM. And perhaps what I don't know if the recruiters would be aware of in the room is the social intelligence that LinkedIn provides you. Because I can also see as a member, just coming across Sandy's profile, that people have also viewed a number of other female leaders in the business. So I'm seeing again the credibility and the validity of them saying there are roles for you as a female here and you've got a successful career ahead. So small tips like that around how you place your leaders into the fold when it comes to pipelining talent and actually showcasing what you do on a day-to-day basis. Now, we're not up here to just talk about other clients, of course. Jeff Weiner, CEO, who Daniel and I follow avidly. If those of you in the room also follow Jeff, you'd know that he's very transparent and certainly a very liked CEO. This was an example that he put out just about a month ago, where he went out to our market, yourselves as our members, and asked the question, if you could improve one thing about LinkedIn's user experience, what would it be? Now, arguably, quite a vulnerable move to put yourself out there and hear what our members actually have to say about the platform. But Jeff did put himself out there. He got over 1,000 likes for the comment, and in turn over 2,000 suggestions and comments, which I know he takes very seriously, as we do as a business, because we're nothing if we're not close to our members. So again, is there capacity for your leaders to actually reach and cut through to the market and understand what are the challenges face on? Because that's pretty important. Going a bit broader, for those of you in the room up the back there, we've actually got David Thodey, who's the outgoing CEO of Telstra. Now again, I'm sure a very time-poor executive. Whilst David is an influencer on our platform, he also takes the time to respond to posts, and I know for a fact he does take the time to actually respond to any queries that he has. But it's this idea of transparency and accessibility, that's what we're trying to drive home. From the posts that David has talked about here, we can see that he's had a point of view on diversity and what the challenges are for women and anyone else in the business that he's encountered. He's also put out some thought leadership around customer service. Again, pretty vulnerable to put yourself out there, where we know that a large telco like Telstra would have ups and downs around the customer service element. But putting yourself out there, being open, has actually worked really well, and I think we could say anecdotally, David's been a very popular CEO. I know the share price has gone up over his leadership capacity, and we think about what are those benefits back to your executives that you can talk about. What are the things that we've seen change?
So when you come to talk to your leadership team or your CEO, it's very important to bring the benefits of becoming socially engaged back to the business benefits. So find out what keeps them up at night, and then show how becoming more socially engaged can help them to rest easy. So, for example, is talent attraction the #1 priority or a key priority? We've already shown one statistic, which is very compelling, how 80% of employees would prefer to work for a socially engaged CEO. I'm assuming bottom line would be one of those priorities. Now, of course, you need to show how being socially engaged can affect the profitability in your particular business context. But we know from speaking to employees at socially engaged companies, they see a direct correlation between that openness and engagement on social and sales effectiveness in the company. In fact, 57% of employees expressed that in our big relationships economics survey we did with the Altimeter Group last year. Or maybe as another example, engagement, closer to HR people's hearts. Is engagement a key priority for your leadership? Now let's say, just for fun, that your company had just hired a director of happiness whose job was to try and uplift the morale in the organisation. Great news, social can help, and we'll show you some ways now.
So further to the study that Daniel mentioned, LinkedIn partnered with the Altimeter Group last year and conducted some research around what were some of the benefits for employees at social organisations. And really the key one that we've seen is that 27% of employees felt that they would be more engaged or inspired about the future of their workplace. 27%. So those of you that have done any employee pulse surveys or have HR backgrounds know that that's phenomenal. And in an era where we have such low employee engagement, we need to do whatever we can to really drive home that and get that result for ourselves. The research also found that 20% of employees felt more likely to be engaged and inspired, and 20% were more likely to stay. So again, from a retention perspective, if that's what your people are concerned about, if that's what your leaders are looking at, there's benefits in that regard as well. And then finally, 15% felt that they were more likely to feel connected to co-workers beyond their core teams. So again, this idea of opening up channels, being accessible, encouraging social. You know, if it's important in your organisations to have flexible work-life balance policies and you're actually working remotely, how do you then foster that collaboration and encourage social as part of that?
So, sorry, you too.
Yeah, no, look, I think we both share the same vision here with this one. The way we see it, it's a snowball effect. And once your leaders get on the path to social engagement, other leaders and employees will follow. And you know, what they'll start to do is share each other's content. They'll have understanding and sort of guidance on what is okay to do on the platform, what's not okay, and having some guidelines from yourselves, really driving that's going to be key. And hopefully what you'll have is a team filled with employee ambassadors, each championing the voice of what it's like to work in your organisations and really doing that from an authentic place. And I think having that team of brand ambassadors is really a topic for another day, Daniel, something we could cover another stage perhaps.
Indeed, another whole topic unto its own. So thank you, Naomi, and thank you everyone for your attention. We're going to take some questions in a minute, so have a think about any questions you want to ask, but I'd encourage you to write down this short link on here. At this site you can download this ebook which is called Executive Playbook, 12 Steps to Become a Social Leader. And it goes much deeper into the themes we've only been able to introduce in this short session now.